VRC historian, author Andrew Lemon's been good enough to join me. Andrew, wonderful to have you on the program, and hopefully you're surviving this ISO period with a smile on your face.
Well, it's always good for historians to spend a bit of time at home doing their research, so it's not all bad, and I've been getting a few good stories under my belt.
Oh, fantastic. Very historic race meeting coming up at Flemington on Saturday. I thought it was a misprint when I read Flemington Cup. I thought, hang on, what's going on here? Tell us about the Flemington Cup.
It's a really strange historical oddity because a lot of people don't realise that Flemington wasn't originally called Flemington. It was just called the Melbourne Racecourse. So one of those stories of questions you get asked is, when did it start being called Flemington? Well, partly in the 1850s. So this year we're celebrating 180 years of continuous racing at Flemington, which is pretty amazing. But in those first pioneering days, it was called the Melbourne Racecourse. And the only way to get to it by land, you could come up the Maribyrnong River, but the only way to get to it by land was up Flemington Road. So anybody who knows Melbourne knows you come up Flemington Road, you make a left at Racecourse Road. But in those days, you couldn't do that because there was no bridge there. So you had to keep going over the bridge at Mount Alexander Road, and then you headed across country to the racecourse. Now, when that bridge was built in the pioneering days, the smart guy who owned the property called Flemington set up a pub there, as you would. And it was the Flemington Inn. And so you had to go past the Flemington Inn to get to the racecourse. And mine host, the genial host at the pub, decides in 1849, why don't I run a race meeting? Now, the mystery is, was his race meeting actually at the grounds of his hotel, just near Debney's Paddock, Debney's Park, that spot there, or was it actually at the racecourse itself? But what we do know is that he sponsorship coming into racing in 1849. He sponsored the Flemington Cup. He got a beautiful silver trophy made, and that became the big feature of the day. And I think that's why Flemington name started to get attached to the racecourse itself.
Oh, that's incredible. So the Flemington Cup, we're talking 1849.
Yeah.
How many runnings of the Flemington Cup was there that you know?
This will be the second.
Right. So they did it once and then stopped.
That's right, because the poor old pubkeeper, he went broke. I don't think he was able to get a license, and so he didn't do as well out of it as he thought. And within a year, he was insolvent. So there were a couple of race meetings run at this Flemington hotel, but he never sponsored another Flemington Cup. And of course, the name Flemington Cup never really gone into use. And of course, the Melbourne Cup invented in 1861. So it's a real historical oddity. But the fascinating thing is that trophy still exists, and it's in the National Gallery of Victoria. It's a beautiful piece of silversmithing made in Melbourne in 1849. I remember seeing it on display in the National Gallery years ago and thinking, hang on, I'd never heard of this 1849 Flemington Cup. But doing the research on it, it's genuine. It was won by a guy called James Crook. And one of the lovely, he changed his name. He put an E on the end of his crook to make it more respectable. But they were a very historic family out at Bacchus Marsh, and they ran the pub at Bacchus Marsh. And apparently James Crook was weighed 23 stone, which I think takes us to 146 kilograms. He was a big guy.
Wow, he is. That's unbelievable. So, is it true the Flemington Cup, by your historical analysis, wasn't just one race? It was a number of heats. Tell us about that.
Look, it's really hard to get your head around the idea that horses would run 2, 3, or even 4 times in one afternoon at a race meeting in those days. 2 good reasons. One is there weren't a lot of horses, but they didn't run it quite as fast as they do these days. But it was just the original traditional way. It was like in a tennis match, best of 3, best of 5. You had one race, but that wasn't going to decide the matter. You had to go around at least once more and see, So the horse who won that Flemington Cup in 1849 was a horse called Belzoni. He was a thoroughbred. We know a little bit about him, and he won the first 2 heats, so he'd won the best of 3. They didn't have to have a 3rd heat, but they were iron horses in those days.
Yeah, that's right. So he won the first 2 heats, so they gave up the 3rd heat.
Yeah.
Is it true that so how far were the races? Were they 2 miles or even further?
That particular race was probably about 1.5 miles. There's one point that says the time of it was 3 minutes and 5 seconds, which is, what's a Melbourne Cup 2 miles is 3.25 minutes. So it wasn't a cracker time, but, given the conditions of the day, they really made their horses run. And James Dunbar, who owned the Flemington Hotel, he managed to win the second race on the card with a horse had the lovely name of Wallaby. So he got something out of the day.
I think it's also wonderful that the VRC are celebrating these 180 years of racing at Flemington and showcasing events like this just to help so that our punters and everyone in racing can understand where we've come from.
Well, exactly. And when you think that Melbourne's first settlement is only 5 years before the first races at Flemington, we've been racing at Flemington virtually the whole of Melbourne's history. And it's fantastic that under these conditions today, the races we're still able to go on. I just think it's terrific that somehow the authorities have kept the show on the road. Let's hope it keeps on happening, because it's a very proud tradition and one that I think Melbourne should be proud of.
Yeah, no doubt. And the Biley Handicap's there as well, named after one of the original horses, the Biley Turk. So once again, historians having a special day on Saturday.
Well, I also love the fact that we're also celebrating the retirement of Pat Hyland, and I'm old enough to remember Pat going around a long time ago, and I did the maths and I worked out Pat's been a part of Flemington for 60 years. That's 1/3 of the total history of Flemington. So it's a big slice of history that we're celebrating at Flemington.
Oh, that's just sensational. Well, we've got a lot to celebrate on Saturday. Thanks so much for explaining it all to us. I can't wait to actually get a visual of this Flemington Cup trophy. That's fascinating, and it's great that it's in the museum looked after.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of work, and so let's celebrate our history as well as our present and our future.
Good on you, Andrew. Thanks for your time, and enjoy Saturday.
I'm always happy to talk. Thanks.